We're going to hear from an eyewitness to one of the history's worst atrocities. If you ever wonder if there's evil in the world, study the Holocaust. Mr. Jack Adler is among the dwindling few remaining survivors of the Holocaust. And I would now like to invite to the stage Mr. Adler to share his story, some of his story. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce our host, again, Major General Mike Lowe, to introduce him for us. General Lowe.
Hey folks, you guys got the video up?
Around the world, acts of hatred, bigotry, and racism are on the rise. In response, the Meisel Museum confronts discrimination and injustice to promote equality, cultural awareness, and respect.
The Meisel Museum has given me the opportunity to speak to kids and tell them my story. So I hope that they learn that it is not okay to mistreat people.
I speak for those whose voices were silenced. 6 million innocent men, women, and children.
I remember that all of a sudden, adults spoke in hushed voices. Terrible things were happening. Jews were picked up and taken into the center of town and summarily just shot for no reason at all other than they were Jewish.
I had to go to school with a yellow star, and that's where my Holocaust started.
There was a law in Germany for young boys to join the Hitler Youth. After about 5 meetings, I had had enough of it.
Just around my birthday, a smuggler was hired. My mom tells me, Ossie, from this moment on, you are an orphan.
So we were taken to the death camp, Bergen-Belsen. I was about 5 years old. And at that time, my mother was already taken away from me and killed.
You just arrived at the Auschwitz-Birkenau extermination and selection camp. They whispered to us, when you march, look strong, straighten up, if you want to live. When we were freed early in the morning, May 1, 1945, by the United States, there were less than 4,000 left.
I think after the Second World War, nobody thought this would ever happen again. And sure enough, it's happening again.
If freedom and democracy is important to you, you are going to have to be active and stand up.
The lesson is acceptance, tolerance, respect. If my family was tolerated, they would be alive today.
So it's very important to convey a message to humanity as a whole, especially the young. After all, they represent our future. So you have to instill in them not to accept any kinds of comments about racism or bigotry.
It begins with each and every one of us, how we treat each other in our own daily life. That spreads to communities, to cultures, to countries.
If young people learn the lessons of the past, then maybe the future will not repeat itself.
Good morning, everyone. It's my honor and privilege to introduce this morning's featured speaker. Jack Adler is a Holocaust survivor who works with the Meisel Museum literally a half a block from here to share his unforgettable story with audiences, especially school children. He's also been down and taught at the Air Force Academy all across our state. As you saw in the film, Jack speaks for those who have been silenced, and in doing so imparts valuable lessons, connecting the past to the present, inspiring others to stand up to racism and bigotry. Jack survived both the Auschwitz, and the Dachau concentration camps. Many of you know the story of the liberation of Dachau, where the Colorado National Guard's 157th Regiment, alongside with Oklahoma's 45th Infantry Division, were responsible for the liberation of Dachau. We have a shared history. After liberation, Jack moved to the United States as a war orphan. He went to build a life here, serving in the United States Army, marrying, having children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. I'm very proud of the special relationship that we have with each other. In fact, 4 years ago, members of the Colorado and Oklahoma National Guard traveled with Jack and representatives from the museum to Dachau for the 70th anniversary of the liberation. There, we were reminded of the powerful connection between the survivors and liberators. All of you and those who came before you are a testament to the sacrifice and service in defense of humanity and dignity. And Jack's presentation speaks to the importance of our collective efforts to confront hatred and bigotry and protect the values of this great nation. Jack, we are tremendously grateful for you. Please give a warm National Guard welcome to Mr. Jack Adler.
Thank you. 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 General Lowe, members of the National Guard, I'm honored to be here with the opportunity to convey a short message of the evil that took place, started today, 80 years ago, September 1, 1939, throughout Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. I speak to you as a child survivor of the Holocaust who spent age 10 to 16 in the Holocaust. I speak to you as an eyewitness to one of the darkest pages in human history of man's inhumanity to man. I was born in Poland, in the city of Pabianice, Poland. At the time, the population numbered around 42,000. The Jewish population, almost 9,000. My immediate family numbered 6, my parents, 2 sisters, brother, and I. Adding to it my extended family in my hometown when the Nazis occupied it, the first week of September 1939, we numbered 83. As a 10-year-old boy, I watched with excitement as the occupation took place because I noticed some of the local population embracing the Nazi soldiers, handing them flowers, food, drinks. Not in my wildest imagination could I have imagined what was in store for the people of my fate. I didn't have to wait too long. Within hours after the occupation took place, notices were posted throughout the city directed towards the Jewish population, which stated in part that effective immediately, no Jewish person is allowed to step outdoors unless he or she wears 2 yellow stars of David attached to their clothing, one in the front, one in the back. Effective immediately, no Jewish child is allowed to attend any public schools, and all Jewish houses of worship must be shut down. The tortures, the beatings began almost immediately. Nazi officers, soldiers would enter Jewish neighborhoods and at random select men and women and chase them like animals with whips and dogs into the town square where they were humiliated, beaten. If anyone objected his or her treatment, they were shot on the spot, and those were daily occurrences. The first part of February 1940, we were moved into a ghetto in the city of Pabianice. The ghetto in the city of Pabianice was an open ghetto, meaning there was no barbed wire surrounding it. However, we had to obey a very strict curfew within the ghetto. We could only move around the ghetto during daylight hours, cross the main street,
twice daily, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. In the ghetto, the Nazis formed, excuse me, a Jewish committee whose primary functions were to provide the Nazis, upon request, laborers to work outside of the ghetto and to distribute to the inhabitants of the ghetto the daily food ration, which on the average day consisted of a slice of bread and a bowl of soup. Within months after we moved into the ghetto, people were dying from malnutrition, disease. I lost my mother and brother in the ghetto of Pabianice. Around March of 1942, we were notified by the German authorities that our ghetto is going to be relocated, and that relocation will take place on May 16, 1942. And they divided the inhabitants of the ghetto into two groups, A and B. On May 16th, we were ordered to be in front of our dwellings at 2 p.m. sharp. 2 p.m. sharp, dozens of Nazi officers, soldiers arrived and marched us all to the soccer field. When we arrived to the soccer field, it was divided right down the middle. Group A were told to move to the left, Group B to the right. Only then did we realize why we were divided into those two groups. In Group A, you found those the Nazis viewed as useless eaters, the old, the sick, and the young. My little sister, who was then 11 years of age, was in Group A. My father, older sister, and I were in Group B. We stayed in the soccer field for approximately 3 days. It was raining, pouring rain. They didn't care. We just stayed there in the rain. Around midnight of the first night in the soccer field, it was very dark in the soccer field. As a matter of fact, most of the lighting came from the headlights of the trucks as they started moving out people from Group A. A couple Nazi officers walked up towards Group B and asked for a couple volunteers to pick up the debris that was left behind by those who were shipped out from Group A, like articles of clothing, pieces of paper, and so on. Hoping to see my little sister, I volunteered. Each volunteer was given a baby carriage. In those days, they had those deep baby carriages. I walked towards Group A, bending down, picking up pieces of paper, articles of clothing, putting all those things into the baby carriage. And when I got close enough towards Group A, and it was dark in the soccer field, I started calling my little sister's name out. And some of the people who were still in Group A repeated calling her name, and to my surprise, she was still there. She came running towards me, and I motioned to her not to get too close. Wait until it's dark again and try to get into the baby carriage. And she did so. And I slowly moved from Group A towards Group B, where my father and older sister were waiting to hear from me. And I told them when I got close enough that she's in the baby carriage, and they took her out when it was dark in the soccer field. The following day, we found out what happened to those who were in Group A, the old, the sick, the young. All of them perished in the extermination camp at Chelmno, Poland. Group B were moved to the ghetto of Lodz, L-O-D-Z. The ghetto of Lodz was a huge ghetto. In its peak, the population exceeded around 300,000 because they sent people from surrounding small towns like my town, Pabianice, into the ghetto of Lodz. The ghetto of Lodz was surrounded by barbed wire. Every 10, 12 feet, there was an armed Nazi guard stationed to make sure that no one tries to escape. Occasionally, people tried to escape, and they were shot on the spot. We remained in the ghetto of Lodz until May 16, 1942, when they took us all to Auschwitz. My little sister was immediately taken, as we found out, my father and I, the following day to the gas chamber. My older sister was sent to the concentration camp at Bergen-Belsen. My father and I were sent to the concentration camps at Kaufering, Germany, a sub-camp of the Dachau camp. My father and I were assigned to work at a construction site where the Nazis were building underground hangars for airplanes. The two of us were assigned to carry bags of cement as it arrived by rail, from the rail to its actual construction site, back and forth, 12 hours a day. We remained in Dachau. I remained in Kaufering, for about 3 months. Most of the population was killed or died from malnutrition or disease. As they reorganized the camps, there were 11 camps in Kaufering. I was separated from my father and sent to the concentration camp at Dachau, Germany. Being that the Kaufering camp was under the jurisdiction of Dachau, I continued to work at the same site. And occasionally, as I marched to or from work, I would see my father, and all I could do is wave to him. Around April 27, 1945, those who were still able to walk were marched out of Dachau, approximately 7,000 prisoners. The march has been documented as the Death March. We marched all during daylight hours. At night, we would sleep in the forest, in the woods. But they would take a group to the other side of the woods. They were given shovels in order to dig a ditch, a big ditch. When the ditch was completed, they were ordered to line up around the perimeter of the ditch, and they were shot to death. When we were marched out, when we were liberated on May 1, 1945, by the United States 3rd and 7th Army under the command of General Dwight David Eisenhower and George Patton, there were less than 4,000 of us left. They just came upon us, and the Army, when they saw us, and they stopped. One officer got on a Jeep with a bullhorn and announced, "This is the United States Army. You are all free." I wouldn't have made it one more day, and if you couldn't continue the march, they wouldn't leave you behind alive. They shot you. And I was immediately hospitalized in a newly formed displaced persons camp at Vierenwald, Germany. My hospitalization lasted about 3 months. I was brought to the United States by the Jewish Children's Bureau of Chicago, Illinois, in 1946. And placed to live in a wonderful foster home in Chicago. First, I attended night school to learn the language. I finished high school, college. I proudly served in the United States Army during the Korean conflict. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I got married. I have 2 wonderful children, a son and a daughter, 4 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. The Holocaust ended 70-some years ago now. Excuse me. What has humanity learned from the evil we call the Holocaust? Not much. You know, there's 7 billion of us on this planet Earth, over 7 billion people. What those sick anti-Semite hate-mongers, even though they're very, very good to demonize, dehumanize, and stereotype the Jewish people, they don't tell you. 2.3 billion are Christian. 1.6 billion are Muslim. Any of you know how many Jewish people are represented in the 7 billion? 1/5 of 1%, a little over 14 million. And what those anti-Semites don't tell you about the Jewish people is that 1/5 of 1% are the recipients of over 20% of Nobel Prizes. And what they don't tell you that some of them or their loved ones would be crippled with polio today if it weren't for a Jewish doctor, Jonas Salk, who discovered the anti-polio vaccine and refused to patent it so that everyone on this planet has access to it, saving millions of lives from this dreadful disease. You know, we don't have to love everyone. I don't, but I respect everyone. Mutual respect, guided by the golden rule, do unto others as you like them to do unto you, is the key to the survival of humanity. Until then, I'm very sorry to say, mankind will continue to destroy each other. So don't like me if you don't want to. just respect me as you like to be respected. I want to thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Adler, we are humbled by your presence. We are inspired and rededicated by your story. Your words are iron, and we need to hear them. Thank you. On behalf of the National Guard Association of the United States, we'd like to present a small token. This is a belt buckle. It's got our enduring symbol, the Minuteman, and it is presented on behalf of our association and our two host states, Colorado and Wyoming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. An honor. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a few minutes. If anybody has a question for Mr. Adler, he would be happy to take that question. Microphones are left and right in the aisles. Here you go, sir.
Remember, there are no stupid questions, only stupid answers, and I'm an expert on those, as you will find out.
Sir, thank you for coming today. My question is, do you have any place that has your story written down that you could share with us? Have you written a book or anything that we could take with us?
I did write a book. The title of the book is Why, the letter Y, and it's available in various bookstores.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Amy Storm from Arizona, and I was just wondering, do you have an approximate number of students, youth, that you have talked to?
Well, so far I spoke since 1992 when I retired to over 1.5 million people. I speak to our military all over the United States, including Hawaii, and especially Hawaii. I mentioned Hawaii. It was very interesting. I was there several times. And when I told them that the horrible thing that took place here at Pearl Harbor has a silver lining, they looked at me. I said, why? They asked me, why do you say that? I said, because if it weren't for the Pearl Harbor attack by the Japanese, the United States would not have entered World War II when they did. And if they would have entered a year later, there would be no survivors, and I wouldn't be here. So I speak to students, civic groups, church groups, military. I speak at Auschwitz for the March of the Living, where students from 40 countries come, around 14,000, 15,000. They want to see the evil place and hear from someone who went through it. So yes, I do speak throughout Colorado, middle schools and up.
Thank you so much for taking time to speak to us today.
I have difficulty hearing.
She said thank you. I think we have one more question coming down the steps here.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for your service to our country and your very touching testimonial. I'm Captain Alan Hansloven from the District of Columbia, and my question for you is, how do you think the media continues to fuel or not fuel what you described as hate toward humanity?
Wait, in my opinion, unfortunately, the media provides us with the information that's taken place. And unfortunately, today there is more hatred towards Jewish people, anti-Semitism, towards the black people and other minorities, almost at the scale when Hitler came to power, unfortunately. And until we have a leader who unifies us rather than divides us, it will continue to be a factor, unfortunately.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. My name is Paul Chernowskis from Texas. I want to thank you for being here today. So, my father was also an immigrant after World War II, and he served the U.S. military in the Air Force. And I'm curious about your service in the Korean conflict and how your past experience informed and guided your actions as a member of the U.S. military.
Well, I was in college at the time in 1950, and I could have gotten an exemption. However, I felt that's the only way I can say thank you to the nation who gave me my freedom back. And I was stationed mostly in the United States at Valley Forge Army Hospital in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Wonderful.